Hi, hello, welcome back. Thank you so much for being here. It's day one. Is it day one, day two, day 1.5? And things are really well, and I'm just so pleased to see so many shiny, happy, beautiful faces. And it is the biggest pleasure of the weekend for me is the opportunity to introduce Vijay Seshadri, who is a friend and a mentor, and he traveled all the way from Brooklyn to be with us. He is the 2014 winner of the Pulitzer Prize for Poetry. He was born in Bangalore, India. Vijay moved to the United States at the age of 5 and called Columbus, Ohio home during his childhood. He earned his undergraduate degree from Oberlin College and then migrated east to New York to attend graduate school at Columbia, and he now calls Brooklyn home. His poetry has appeared in enough prestigious publications to fill this entire reading slot, so I'm just going to do an abbreviated list. The Nation, The New Yorker, The Paris Review, Shenandoah, The Times Book Review, The Yale Review, and a number of anthologies, including 4 appearances in the Best American Poetry. The same may be said of the plethora of awards he's received. In addition to the Pulitzer, the James Laughlin Prize of the Academy of American Poets, the MacDowell Colony Fellowship for Distinguished Poetic Achievement, the Paris Review's Bernard F. Cooper Long Poem Prize, and a 2004 Guggenheim Fellowship. Vijay's collections include Wild Kingdom, The Long Meadow, The Disappearances, and 3 Sections. He teaches in the undergraduate writing and graduate MFA programs at Sarah Lawrence College. The New Yorker has written, appreciative readers of Seshadri's poems can recognize his expert assimilation of American poetry from Frost to Lowell, Bishop, and Ashbery, their tutelary spirits resplendently alive in a tradition he himself is significantly shaping with his own alchemical brand of poetic magic. Please give a warm welcome to an artist whose work truly casts a spell, Vijay Seshadri.
I've been given so much water since I've been up here. There's water everywhere, you know. I'm going to keep all this water and ship it to California. Billy Collins always used to say that these lecterns should come with little water holders, like, you know, the chairs in movie theaters. So it's really great to be here and to be introduced by Jess, who's, you know, a beloved student of mine and one of my prize students, one of the people I'm really, really proud of, and terrific writer. And it's great to be back in Vermont. I was here at the end of that bitter winter in April, and now I'm at the beginning of, you know, probably another bitter winter. So, you know, it's like, yeah. I think, you know, Jess asked me, well, do you know what you're going to read, Vijay? And I said, I have no idea. And I still have no idea, so I'll just start at the beginning and keep reading until I kind of get some inspiration. So I'll read the first poem in my new book, and it's called Imaginary Number. The mountain that remains when the universe is destroyed is not big and is not small. Big and small are comparative categories. And to what could the mountain that remains when the universe is destroyed be compared? Consciousness observes and is appeased. The soul scrambles across the screes. The soul, like the square root of -1, is an impossibility that has its uses. The square root of -1, by the way, is what in mathematics is called the imaginary number. And can't possibly exist, but they use it to solve all these equations. I mean, if you've ever studied, higher algebra, it's just amazing. It's this poem is called Trailing Clouds of Glory. And the title refers to a line in Wordsworth's Immortality Ode, and it's part of a couplet, and the couplet goes, "Trailing clouds of glory did we come from God who is our home." And if you remember the poem, you remember that it's about kind of the immortal, extraordinary creatures that we are, and the way in which, when we become material beings, we're sort of, the prison house closes on us. And it's one of those great romantic laments about the loss of inspiration and the loss of vision, and that has nothing to do with this poem. I just, but I thought of it. I actually thought of it because, I was, like a lot of fathers these days, I was in, the room when my son was born, and I thought, of course I've got to do something with this, and I never really did anything with that actual experience, but the image was always in the back of my mind, and then the state of Arizona passed their immigration law. There is a connection here. Whereby if you look like you might be undocumented, they can pull you over and ask you for your papers to prove that you are legally here in America, and I was really bummed out by this because I was thinking, gosh, now I can never go back to the Grand Canyon because I will be subject to illegal search and seizure, and I love the Grand Canyon, and I like walking around in it and looking at it, and but what really struck me was that when I was young, I would be very indignant at a political development like this, I mean, throw out Anglo-Saxon jurisprudence extending all the way back to the Magna Carta and sort of assault the Constitution, just, But, strangely enough, when I read about this law, I said to myself, God, that's a great idea for a poem. Yeah. So I kind of, you can see the cynical place at which I have arrived in my, middle age, and so, and this is the poem, and I found a way to fit in the Wordsworth title and, the inspiration that gave me the title, Trailing Clouds of Glory. Even though I'm an immigrant, the angel with the flaming sword seems fine with me. He unhooks the velvet rope. He ushers me into the club. Some activity in the mosh pit, a banquet here, a panhandler there, a gray curtain drawn down over the infinitely curving lunette, Jupiter in its crescent phase, huge, a vista of a waterfall with a rainbow in the spray, a few desultory orgies, a billboard of the snub-nosed electric car of the future. The inside is exactly the same as the outside, down to the MC and the yellow spats. So why the angel with the flaming sword, bringing in the sheep and waving away the goats, and the men with the binoculars, elbows resting on the roll bars of jeeps, peering into the desert? There is a border, but it is not fixed. It wavers, it shimmies, it rises and plunges into the unimaginable seventh dimension before erupting in a field of Dakota corn. On the F train to Manhattan yesterday, I sat across from a family threesome, Guatemalan by the look of them, delicate and archaic and Mayan, and obviously undocumented to the bone. They didn't seem anxious. The mother was laughing and squabbling with the daughter over a knockoff smartphone on which they were playing a video game together. The boy, maybe 3, disdained their ruckus. I recognized the scowl on his face, the retrospective maskless rage of inception. He looked just like my son when my son came out of his mother after 30 hours of labor. The head squashed, the lips swollen, the skin empurpled and hideous with blood and afterbirth. Out of the inflamed tunnel and into the cold room of harsh sounds, he looked right at me with his bleared eyes. He had a voice like Richard Burton's. He had an impressive command of the major English texts. I will do such things, what they are, yet I know not, but they shall be the terrors of the earth, he said. The child, he said, is father of the man. Jess actually is a memoir writer, and she was in a workshop of nonfiction prose that I taught. The reason I was teaching that class actually is, a long, sad story of my dissembling and lying to the deans at Sarah Lawrence and getting away with it. But I was, there was a period when I was trying to write a memoir, and it was very frustrating, and I couldn't really do it. And out of that frustration, I wrote this poem. It's called Memoir. Orwell says somewhere that no one ever writes the real story of their life. The real story of a life is the story of its humiliations. If I wrote that story now, radioactive to the end of time, people, I swear your eyes would fall out. You couldn't peel the gloves fast enough from your hands scorched by the firestorms of that shame. Your poor hands, your poor eyes, to see me weeping in my room or boring the tall blonde to death. Once I accused the innocent. Once I bowed and prayed to the guilty. I still wince at what I once said to the devastated widow. And one October afternoon, under a locust tree whose blackened pods were falling and making illuminating patterns on the pathway, I was seized by joy, and someone saw me there, and that was the worst of all, lacerating and unforgettable. This poem is called This Morning, and it's kind of, I'll give you a little aside about my kind of literary development. I grew up in a poetic culture that was very revolutionary, America of the, I got into poetry when I was about 15 in the late 60s, and there were all of these ideas. And when I finally started writing poetry seriously, I'd gotten sick of all of the ideas about poetry and just kind of wrote what was essentially a sort of, the comfort food poem, for me, which was kind of like the center of the tradition. I didn't vary from it, but I always, looking back, I always felt like, well, I could have done that other kind of stuff that other people did, and and one of the things that I was always attracted to, especially in the kind of the controversies of the 60s, which spilled over into the 70s when I became really aware of them, was this notion that, we live in moments, and the meaning of the poem is to sort of capture the absolute present in some way, And the great exponents of this, of course, were the New York School, Frank O'Hara, James Schuyler, people like that. And, and I always respected and admired those poets. And so this poem, I got up one morning and I said, well, I'm going to write a poem like that. And it's called This Morning. And, of course, those poems are never like that, right? There's no, we're always being kind of contaminated by the traumas of the past and the hopes for the future, right? We never really can get back to the moment in which we are. It's just, And you know, the achievement of art is to create that illusion in some way. You know. Which is why music is probably the greatest of the arts, because music creates that illusion the most completely. You know, it absorbs us in the moment more completely than anything else. Yeah. But anyway, I tried, and I woke up one morning and I went to my word processor and I typed out "This Morning." That was the title, and this is the poem. First, I had 3 apocalyptic visions, each more terrible than the last. The graves open and the sea rises to kill us all. Then the doorbell rang and I went downstairs and signed for 2 packages. One just an envelope, but the other long and bulky, difficult to manage. Both for my neighbor Gus. "You're never not at home," the FedEx guy said appreciatively. It's true. I don't shave or even wash. I keep the air conditioners roaring. Though it's summer, one of the beautiful red and conifer green Bayside fuel oil trucks that bed down in the depot by the canal was refreshing the subsurface tanks with black drafts wrung from the rock, blood of the rock, sucked up from the crevices. The driver looked unconcerned. Leaning slightly on each other, Frank and Louise stepped over his hose and walked by slowly, on the way to their cardiologists. None of the events in that poem actually happened. Because, you know, it was actually a very boring morning. Nothing was happening and nothing was going on in my mind, so I had to make a bunch of stuff up. So I'm sorry, Frank O'Hara. This poem is called Surveillance Report, and I wrote it long before the Edward Snowden revelations about the NSA. I got there before he did, you know. And I didn't even have to, you know, run away to Russia. Surveillance Report. The omnidirectional mic and the video camera, both tiny, hidden in the bonsai cypress, are picking up my sunrise self-help talk show in the makeshift kitchen studio in a bathrobe and bunny slippers. First, the opening monologue. Then the body banters with the mind, then cue up the callers. Caller X is unhappy with the latest dream interpretation. Caller X is cut off with a flick of the wrist. Caller Y wants to share that my fearless candor has given her permission to become utterly transparent herself. Thank you, Caller Y. Your inner light can be seen from here. Night visiting revenants, clerks of the underworld, gnawing the half-buried roots of being, spirits of the burning trees, kiss me goodbye. The tape shows me checking my chronometer and exiting for work. Observers posted along my morning commute observe the usual detours, the purchase of potables and comestibles. Flash forward the digital feed. At 1000 hours, the current workplace asset texts, subject agitated, begging colleagues, please have the courtesy not to be conscious of me. Of the 3 or 4 scenarios employed to predict my next location during the interminable lunch hour, when the terrible questions of where to go and what to eat, among choices once enticing but now exposed in all their bitter banality, assault even the most cheerful of our targets. Today, which is a Tuesday, is Burning House Scenario Day. Cloud after cloud of smoke and flames sweep through and over the turrets, the Widow's Walk, the pergolas, the porte cochere. Fire boiling through the leaded window panes immolates the gillyflowers. Though I haven't been located, for reasons I don't understand, in the crowd shots pirated from the eyewitness news feed, what the crowd feels I would feel if I were there to feel it. But I'm not there to feel it. I'm not there at all. There at the next disaster, the last disaster, but one, but one, but one. The dormant listening posts activate, Windowless vans crammed with information technology park on the corners of all the streets. Oh, the wailing in the control room, the recriminations, the pointing of fingers, the blame game, the pleas of the pragmatic to move forward, not backward, and solve this problem. Find me and put me back on the grid. Where will I be scanned for first? Maybe I'm in the trashed, padlocked public restroom in the park. The pipes are hissing. The concrete floor is littered with syringes and treacherous with pools of chill and fetid standing water. The mirrors are shattered and the sinks and urinals are shattered. This is the restroom nobody ever visits, in the park abandoned by humankind, the dead zone where the transducer and the infrared lens quail, where all the signals ricochet. Or, alternatively, I could be on a beach somewhere. I'll read another kind of political one, or politically one, sort of. Once you finally give up on politics, it really does become a wonderful arena for your imagination. And start playing around with it. Actually, I read in Connecticut, and I was making these kind of jokes. I've been reading a lot, and getting jokier and jokier. Pretty soon it'll just all be patter, and I won't even read poems anymore, just little lines, and then start pattering about them. Anyway, I was making these jokes about how I wasn't political, and this woman got up and she said, "Well, I think that's nonsense," in the Q&A afterwards. "These poems are very political." And I said, yes, but keep it quiet. There might be a government agent in the... Anyway. This one is called Secret Police. The towelette flutters punctually in the window. I'm going to start over. The towelette flutters punctually in the window. The neighbor who never talks silently combusts on his patio in choreographed figure eights. The phone clicks. Click, click. Click, click. What's that sound? Is it you or is it I? It's not you and it's not me. Just the fact of the phone, a turquoise Western Electric Princess model featuring the revolutionary illuminated rotary dial, so misplaced, frightening and antediluvian, on this our tablescape of austere futurity, proves that it is the secret police. Who else could make the timelines intersect and riddle them with emphasis and coincidence? Is there a message? Are they toying with us? A whole season is passing during which the evidentiary, not to say allegorical nature of our experience, along with the vast conspiracies therein implied, is making itself apparent in a series of incidents the naive would call accidental, but in which we can detect the presence of the secret police. He says that's not his name, when you know it's his name. She in whose frank gaze you were wont to drown now averts her eyes. Don't even get me started on our co-workers, whose sinuosities are instinct with a prevaricating design, or on the subway in the sand, or on the reason why I forget what I should remember and remember what I should forget, or on the flamingos that dart like sparrows and soar and dive and congregate in this our city, birdless until now since time began. A shimmering is in a mirage. A darkening is in an aftermath. A white light, then a red light, then a black light. And then the meaning I mean, the meaning and its meaning, which I am just about to grasp. Governments are falling as we speak. This poem is called Nursing Home. The subject matter is evident from the title. The form needs a little explaining. It's in 3 sections. The first section is a lyric. The second section is prose. And the third section is play script, but it's not clear who is speaking in the play script. Nursing home. 1. She had dreams 50 years ago, she remembers on this day. She dreamed about Bombay, it looked like Rio. She dreamed about Rio, which looked like itself, though Rio was a city she'd never seen, not on TV, not in a magazine. Brain scans done on her show her Parasilvian pathways and declivities, choked by cities, microscopic mercurial cities, made from her memories, good and bad, from the things she saw but didn't see, from the remembered pressure of every lover she ever had. 2. Unexpected useful combinations between cognitive psychology and neuroscience have fostered new observational protocols not only for elderly patients in the Lewy body pathologic subgroup, but those discovered across a wide spectrum of dementias and dementia-induced phenomena, including but not limited to normal pressure hydrocephalus, NPH, classical Alzheimer's disease, AD, and the deformations in mental recognition and function, dear, eat the soup with the spoon, not the fork, the coruscating visions, who is that laid out in my bed, the spontaneous motor features of Parkinsonism, synaptic patterns embodied in sparks, showers, electrical cascades, waterfalls, and shooting stars are increasingly revealing an etiology proximately to be fully established and suggestive links between processes strictly biochemical and ideational and linguistic explosions for which documentation has been massive while analysis has so far been scant. While an adequate conceptual apparatus still remains out of reach, progress across a broad frontier of research has been sufficiently dramatic to suggest possible developments that will lead both to therapeutic remedies for distressed elderly patients and to a synthesis among disciplines that have heretofore seemed not just incompatible, but in direct conflict with one another. Certain coherencies have been unearthed that have truly startled our consensus. 3. She doesn't know any better than to act the fool. Is she dead? No, she's not dead. Is she dead? No, I'm not dead, and I don't want anybody to think I'm dead. Do you think it's funny? Wonder why she acts like that. Is she dead? No, she's not dead, and I'm not dead neither. Is she really dead? No, she's not dead, but she's acting the fool. Are you really dead? No, I'm not really dead. I'm just acting the fool. I'll show you how I can act the fool. No, I don't think I look nice. I think I look purty. No, I'm not dead. I just act like I'm dead. What makes you want to act like she's dead? Do you think she's dead? Do you think she's dead? Or is she just acting the fool? This one is called As If. Which is the particle that introduces the subjunctive mood in English, not the declarative mood, which says something or denies something, but the subjunctive mood, which suggests possibility. It's as if it were true rather than it is true. As if. Mother is excavating tissue from deep in her cerebral mines. Father is crying in his sleep. The terrible family secret that won't be exposed in these lines, because there is no terrible family secret, has sister and brother raving at each other. Finally, to dissect the well-meant lies and realize there's nothing underneath, nothing to reveal, and nothing is real but these facts, bright and emphatic. Mother in her cave and father sleeping, mother in oblivion and father weeping, sister and brother forever searching the attic for the terrible family secret that is not and never was and is the cause, is the cause. This poem is called Bright Copper Kettles. Do you all know where that title comes from? Do you? Nobody? Anybody? What? Raindrops on roses and whiskers on... I always hope people will say no so I can actually sing the song, but everybody, says yes. Yeah. They used to have sing-along The Sound of Music. You remember that from the 90s? In the Village especially, they would rent out movie theaters and show The Sound of Music, and they'd have all the lyrics, and people would go and sing along with all the songs. It was great. I never went, but it would have been great if I had gone. Yeah. Bright Copper Kettles. Dead friends coming back to life, dead family, speaking languages living and dead, their minds retentive, their 5 senses intact, their footprints like a butterfly's, mercy shining from their comprehensive faces. This is one of my favorite things. I like it so much I sleep all the time. Moon by day and sun by night find me dispersed deep in the dreams where they appear. In fields of goldenrod, in the city of 5 pyramids, before the empress with the melting face, under the towering plane tree, they just show up. It's all right, they seem to say. It always was. They are diffident and polite. Who knew the dead were so polite? They don't want to scare me. Their heads don't spin like weather vanes. They don't want to steal my body and possess the earth and wreak vengeance. They're dead, you understand. They don't exist. And besides, why would they care? They're subatomic, horizontal. Think about it. One of them shyly offers me a pencil. The eyes under the eyelids dart faster and faster. Through the intercom of the house where for so long there was no music, the Right Reverend Al Green is singing. I could never see tomorrow. I was never told about the sorrow. I think I'll read one more poem from this book and one from The Long Meadow, which was my previous book, and then end with the last poem in this book. This one is called Thought Problem. How strange would it be if you met yourself on the street? How strange if you liked yourself, took yourself in your arms, married your own self, propagated by techniques known only to you, and then populated the world. Replicas of you are everywhere. Some are Arabs, some are Jews, some live in yurts. It is an abomination, but better that your sweet and scrupulously neat self emerges at many points on the earth to watch the horn moon rise than all those dolts out there, turning into pillars of salt wherever we look. If we have to have people, let them be you. Spritzing your geraniums, driving yourself to the haberdashery, killing your supper with a blowgun. Yes, only in the forest do you feel at peace, up in the branches and down in the terrific gorges. But you've seen through everything else. You've fled in terror across the frozen lake. You found yourself in the sand, the palace, the prison, the dockside stews. And long ago, on this same planet, you came home to an empty house, poured a scotch and soda, and sat in a recliner in the unlit rumpus room, puzzled at what became of you. And this is the last poem in the Long Meadow, and it's called The Long Meadow. Near the end of one of the old poems, the Son of Righteousness, the source of virtue and civility, on whose back the kingdom is carried, as on the back of the tortoise the earth is carried, passes into the next world. The wood is dark, and on the other side of the wood the sea is shallow, warm, endless. In and around it there is no thread of life. So little is the atmosphere charged with possibility that he might as well be wading through a flooded basement. He wades for what seems like forever, and never stops to rest in the shade of the metal rain trees, springing out of the water at fixed intervals. Time, though endless, is also short. So he wades on until he walks out of the sea and into the mountains, where he burns on the windward slopes and freezes in the valleys. After unendurable struggles, he finally arrives at the celestial realm. The god waits there for him. The god invites him to enter. But looking through the glowing portal, he sees on that happy plain not those he thinks wait eagerly for him, his beloved, his brothers, his companions in war and exile, all long since dead and gone, but, sitting pretty and enjoying the gorgeous sunset, his cousin and bitter enemy, the cause of that war, that exile, whose arrogance and vicious indolence plunged the world into grief. The god informs him that yes, those he loved have been carried down the river of fire. Their thirst for justice offended the cosmic powers who are jealous of justice. In their place in the celestial realm, called Alaukika in the ancient texts, the breaker of faith is now glorified. He, at least, acted in keeping with his nature. Who has not felt a little of the despair the Son of Righteousness now feels, staring wildly around him? The god watches, not without compassion and a certain wonder. This is the final illusion, the one to which all the others lead. He has to pierce through it himself without divine assistance. He will take a long time about it, with only his dog to keep him company, the mongrel dog, celebrated down the millennia, who has waited with him, shivered and burned with him, and never abandoned him to his loneliness. That dog bears a slight resemblance to my dog, a skinny, restless, needy, overprotective mutt who was rescued from a crack house by Suzanne. On weekends, and when I can shake free during the week, I take her to the Long Meadow in Prospect Park, where dogs are allowed off the leash in the early morning. She's gray-muzzled and old now, but you can't tell that by the way she runs. And I'll end with this poem. A few years ago, and I wanted to read this because the time is now coming around again. That, every once in a while the New York Times decides, well, let's torture some poets. This is what I imagine their editorial meeting. Okay, isn't it time, we torture some poets by giving them, a ludicrous assignment and offering them, space in our, editorial pages in the Weekend Review if they complete it, and you've seen those poems, right, in the Times. And this one was like, they called a bunch of poets, including me, and asked us to write about a poem about Easter, about the end of daylight savings time. This was like, right, write a poem about the end of daylight savings time. And, you know, and it was quite a roster. I mean, I was glad to be, Derek Walcott, Louise Glick, James Tate, Mary Oliver, and little old me. And I thought, so I wrote this poem, and I called it Light Verse. And, and I have to say that, I thought, and other people told me this too, that mine was the best offering. The rest of them were just like, oh, and Merwin too, Merwin, I mean, it's like, yeah. And that was one of those poems, I know Merwin gets up in the morning and he just, it's like clearing his throat, He was a great, great poet, though. Anyway, standard time begins. And you all know that, it's spring forward, fall back, so when daylight savings time ends, it's, it's light when you think it's dark rather than dark when you think it's light. I just, you have to understand that in order to get the poem. I just wanted to make sure everybody was like on the same celestial page with me here. Light verse, standard time begins. It's just 5, but it's light like 6. It's lighter than we think. Mind and day are out of sync. The dog is restless. The dog's owner is sleeping and dreaming of Elvis. The treetops should be dark purple, but they're pink. Here and now, the sun shakes off an hour. The sun assumes its pre-calendrical power. It is, though, only what we make it seem. Now in the dog owner's dream, the dog replaces Elvis and grows bigger than that big tower in Singapore and keeps on growing until he arrives at a size with which only the planets can empathize. He sprints down the ecliptic's plane, chased by his owner, Jane. That's not really her name, who yells at him to come back and synchronize. Thank you.